Mom, please don't talk too much at the restaurant, okay? Sometimes you say things that just don't land right. Those were the first words my daughter-in-law said to me when I arrived at the luxury resort in Miami Beach, without so much as a welcoming hug. Today I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would. And if, for just a second, any of this sounds familiar, I just ask that you leave a like and subscribe. It will help me to keep unburdening myself. My name is Grace Miller. I am 67 years old, and for 40 of them, I have been the silent shadow behind my family's success. That Friday in March, as I walked through the elegant lobby of the Serenity Grand Hotel on the Florida coast, my gray skirt and white blouse seemed out of place among guests dripping in designer labels. My comfortable nurse's shoes sank into the plush Persian rug, and my hands, hardened by years of work, clutched a small suitcase containing the few things I had packed for what I believed would be a special weekend. The invitation had arrived 3 weeks earlier. "We want to celebrate our 5th wedding anniversary with you," my son Michael had said over the phone, with that warm voice that reminded me of the little boy who used to seek comfort in my arms after a nightmare. "The hotel is gorgeous, Mom. You're going to love it." For the first time in years, I had felt truly wanted, that my presence was desired and not merely tolerated, but reality revealed its cruel face from the very first moment. Jessica, my daughter-in-law, greeted me with that artificial smile she had perfected over 5 years of marriage. Her blue eyes scanned me from head to toe, lingering on my simple outfit with an expression of barely concealed disdain. She wore a white linen dress that probably cost more than my monthly salary as an LPN at Cleveland General Hospital, and her heeled sandals clicked against the marble with an authority I had never known. "Grace," she said, kissing the air near my cheek without our skin ever touching. "So glad you could make it. Though, did you not bring something a little more festive? It's just that people dress a certain way here, you understand?" Her words were like tiny daggers, each wrapped in a false, motherly concern that hurt more than direct criticism. Michael appeared moments later, carrying my 3-year-old granddaughter, Sophia. His face lit up when he saw me, and for an instant, I felt it would all be worth it. "Grandma!" the little one squealed, stretching her tiny arms towards me. When I hugged her, her curly blonde hair smelled of chamomile shampoo and that specific sweetness of children. But Jessica intervened immediately. "Honey, be careful. Grandma just came from the hospital. She might be carrying germs," she told Sophia, prying her from my arms with a seemingly casual but definitive movement. "It's better to keep some distance for now." The comment hit me like a ton of bricks. I had spent 30 years caring for the sick, always impeccable with my hygiene, always protecting my patients and my family. But in her words, I was dirty, dangerous. During dinner that first night at the hotel restaurant, I sat in silence as they chatted about people I didn't know, places I'd never been, experiences I had never been a part of. Michael was now a marketing director for a tech company in Austin, a world entirely alien to my own. Jessica came from a wealthy family in Charleston, where her father was a prominent lawyer and her mother chaired charity galas for the high society. "Aren't the jumbo prawns just divine?" Jessica asked me at one point. But before I could answer, she had already resumed her conversation with Michael about the private school where they wanted to enroll Sophia. "It's important she rubs elbows with the right people from a young age," she was saying, while I silently picked at my salad, feeling that every word was an indirect reference to my inadequacy as an influence in my granddaughter's life. That night, alone in my room, I sat before the vanity mirror and studied my reflection. The wrinkles around my eyes told the story of sleepless nights caring for Michael when he was a boy and I was a single mother. My hands showed the marks of years working double shifts to pay for his college tuition. My gray hair, which Jessica had suggested could benefit from a good dye job, was pulled back in the same practical bun I had worn for decades at the hospital. In that small suitcase, I had carefully packed the photo of Michael graduating from Ohio State, the first person in our family to earn a degree. I remembered how I had cried with pride that day, how I had felt that all the sacrifices had been worth it. I had also brought my mother's rosary, the pearls I had inherited from my grandmother, and a small St. Christopher medal that always gave me peace in difficult times. As I listened to the laughter drifting from the terrace of the room next door, where Michael and Jessica were enjoying a bottle of wine that cost more than my groceries for a week, I began to understand that this trip wasn't a family celebration. It was something much more painful, a public demonstration of how far behind I had been left by the new life they had built, a constant reminder that my unconditional love was no longer enough to guarantee my place in their hearts. Saturday morning arrived with the sound of seagulls and the murmur of the Atlantic Ocean gently crashing against the shore. I woke up early, as I always had for my early shifts at the hospital, and for a moment, I forgot where I was. The Egyptian cotton sheets were so different from those in my small Cleveland apartment that for an instant, I thought I was in one of the hospital's VIP rooms, where I sometimes helped prepare important patients. But reality returned when I heard Jessica's voice from the adjoining room, speaking on the phone to someone in that imperious tone she reserved for people she considered her inferiors. No, the room must be ready by 2 o'clock sharp, and make sure the flowers are white orchids, not those cheap roses they sent last time. I dressed in my second blouse, the navy blue one I had carefully ironed the night before, and went down to the restaurant for breakfast. Michael was already there, reading the paper while Sophia played with her cereal. Upon seeing me, my granddaughter ran towards me with that pure spontaneity of children, but Jessica appeared immediately like a vigilant guardian. "Sophia, darling, don't run in the restaurant. We're not carnival folk," she said, and though her words were aimed at the child, her eyes were fixed on me. "Come, sit here next to Mommy." The comment about carnival folk hurt me deeply, not just for the implicit contempt, but because my own grandmother had Cherokee blood, something I had never been ashamed of until that moment. During breakfast, as they discussed the day's plans, I started to remember everything I had done for Michael over the years. The flashbacks came in waves, each more painful than the last. I mentally saw the small kitchen table in our neighborhood in West Park, where I did homework with him every night after my 12-hour shifts. I remembered selling my mother's jewelry to pay for his math tutor when he started struggling in high school. "Do you remember, Michael, when you had pneumonia at 15? I asked suddenly, interrupting their conversation about the hotel spa. He looked up from his newspaper with a confused expression, as if I had spoken in another language. "You were in the hospital for a week, and I took all my vacation days so I wouldn't have to leave your side." "Oh yeah, right, Mom," he replied, with that uncomfortable smile he had developed whenever I brought up the past. But that was a long time ago. His words made it sound as if my memories were irrelevant, an unnecessary nostalgia that interrupted his perfect present. Jessica cleared her throat softly, that subtle signal she had perfected to indicate I was talking too much. "Grace, don't you think it's time to enjoy the present instead of living in the past? Michael is a successful man now, isn't that right, honey?" But the memories kept coming, uninvited. I clearly saw that December dawn when Michael, at 23, came home crying because he had been laid off from his first job. I had been working a night shift and came home to find him sitting in the kitchen, his eyes red and his tie loosened. Without a second's thought, I took out the savings I had put away to fix the leaking roof and gave it to him. "Take this, so you can look for another job without pressure," I had told him. "Your future is more important than my leaks." I had lived for 6 months with buckets strategically placed around the house, listening to the constant pit-pat of drops every time it rained. But Michael found a better job the next month, and when he received his first paycheck, he bought himself a new suit instead of helping me with the roof. I said nothing then, because his happiness was my happiness. "You know what, Grace?" Jessica said suddenly, as if she had been reading my mind. "I think it would be wonderful for you to take today to relax. Michael and I want to spend some quality time alone, couple stuff." Her words sounded considerate, but there was something in her tone that made me feel like an intrusion rather than a guest. "But I thought we were going to spend the day together," I said, my voice sounding smaller than I intended. "You said on the phone you wanted me here to celebrate with you." Michael exchanged a quick glance with Jessica, one of those silent marital gestures that exclude the rest of the world. "Of course, Mom. But not the whole time. We need our space too. Besides, you could watch Sophia while we go to the spa. She adores you." And there it was again, reduced to the free babysitter, the convenient caregiver, the useful grandmother. But what hurt the most was realizing there was a pattern to all of this. I remembered Michael's wedding, where Jessica had insisted I sit at the extended family table instead of the head table because it looked better for the photos. I remembered Sophia's baptism, where my gift had been discreetly put away while the expensive gifts from Jessica's parents were prominently displayed. For the next few hours, as I walked alone through the hotel gardens watching Sophia, I observed other families. I saw grandparents being consulted on important decisions, being photographed with pride, occupying central places in conversations. And I wondered when exactly I had gone from being the respected matriarch to the tolerated domestic help. Little Sophia, oblivious to the adult tensions, took my hand with that blind trust only children possess. "Grandma, why does Mommy say you can't come to my school like the other grandmas?" she asked with the brutal honesty of a 3-year-old. "She says your job is what's the word? Too common." Her words pierced me like shards of glass. My job. 30 years saving lives, comforting families, being the hand that held those who suffered in their darkest moments. Common? Was it common to wake up at 5 in the morning to care for people I didn't even know? Was it common to sacrifice my own needs so that others could heal? That afternoon, when Michael and Jessica returned from the spa, I found them in the hotel bar sharing a bottle of Moet and Chandon. Jessica was wearing a new dress, probably bought that morning from one of the hotel's exclusive boutiques. Her freshly manicured nails gleamed under the ambient lights, and her skin radiated with that glow that only a luxury facial can provide. "How was Sophia?" Michael asked, but his attention was already on his phone, checking work messages as if my answer were a mere formality. "She was fine," I replied, but what I wanted to say was, "Your daughter asked me why her mother is ashamed of me. Your daughter wants to know why I can't visit her at school like other grandmothers do. Your daughter is absorbing this contempt and learning that a grandmother's love is something to be ashamed of." But I said none of it. As always, I held my words, swallowed my pain, and smiled, because that was what was expected of me. That night, alone in my room, I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror, and for the first time in years, I asked myself a question that terrified me. What would happen if I simply stopped being available for all of this? What would happen if I stopped being the convenient solution to their problems and started being simply Grace? The question scared me so much that I immediately pushed it from my mind, but the seed had already been planted. Sunday dawned overcast, as if the sky had decided to reflect the weight I felt in my chest. I woke to the sound of raised voices coming from Michael and Jessica's room. At first, I thought it was the television, but I soon recognized the voices of my son and daughter-in-law arguing about something I couldn't quite understand. "It can't go on like this, Michael. It's embarrassing," I heard Jessica say in that sharp voice she reserved for when she lost her patience. "Yesterday at the spa, the massage therapist asked me if the older woman with us was, well, if she was all there. Because she talks to herself and asks strange questions." My heart stopped. Not all there? Talking to myself? I tried to remember if I had done anything strange, but the only thing I could think of was that I had been murmuring a prayer for a critically ill patient back at the hospital. Or perhaps I had commented aloud on how beautiful the hotel garden was. "Jessica, that's my mother," Michael replied, but his voice sounded tired, defeated, as if he were defending something he no longer fully believed in. "Exactly, she's your mother. But she's also an elderly woman who clearly doesn't fit into our lifestyle. Look, honey, I'm not saying abandon her, but maybe it's time to consider options." Options? The word echoed in my head like a funeral bell. I sat on the edge of the bed, feeling my hands tremble slightly. They had been talking about me as if I were a problem to be solved, a nuisance to be managed. I went down to the restaurant later than usual, hoping they would have already finished breakfast. But I was wrong. They were there, at the table by the window overlooking the sea, with Sophia coloring in a book. As I approached, Jessica whispered something in Michael's ear, and they both looked at me with that expression I had learned to recognize, pity mixed with annoyance. "Good morning," I murmured, heading for an empty table at the opposite end of the restaurant. "Grandma!" Sophia shouted, holding her pink crayon in the air. "Come see my drawing!" But before I could take a step, Jessica intervened with a smile so fake it made my eyes ache. "Sweetheart, Grandma is going to have breakfast at her table. We're almost done here, right, honey? Michael nodded without looking at me. Without looking at me. My own son, the boy who had slept in my bed when he had nightmares until he was 8. The teenager who had told me I was the bravest woman in the world when he saw me working 2 jobs to pay for his college, now couldn't even meet my gaze. I sat alone, as I had the day before, but this time the waiter who served me was different. He was an older man, perhaps my age, with rough hands that betrayed years of hard work. His name tag said Tony. "Are you all right, ma'am?" he asked in a low voice, leaning in slightly. "Forgive me for prying, but I saw you having breakfast alone yesterday too. And today? Well, you seem sad." His simple words broke something inside me. For the first time in 2 days, someone had truly seen me, had noticed my pain. My eyes filled with tears that I desperately tried to hold back. "I'm fine," I lied, but my voice broke as I said the words. Tony placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Look, I don't know what's going on, but I have 3 kids of my own, and I know a suffering mother when I see one. If you need to talk, I'll be around." After breakfast, Jessica announced they had special plans for the afternoon. "We're going to a luncheon at the yacht club," she said, applying lip gloss in the lobby mirror. "It's members only, very exclusive. You could, I don't know, enjoy the hotel pool, or take a walk around the marina." They didn't invite me. They didn't even pretend to consider including me. It was official. I was the nuisance to be disposed of during important activities. "And Sophia?" I asked, clinging to the only genuine connection I seemed to have left. "Oh, she's coming with us. It's important for her to get used to these environments," Jessica replied, adjusting a pearl necklace that probably cost more than my salary for 6 months. I spent the afternoon alone in the hotel gardens, sitting on a bench under a palm tree, watching happy families pass by. There were couples my age strolling hand in hand, grandparents playing with their grandchildren in the pool, entire families laughing together on the terraces. And there I was, alone, invisible, like a ghost inhabiting the spaces between other people's happiness. That's when I decided to call my only true friend, Carol, my colleague from the hospital. With trembling hands, I dialed her number. "Grace, how's the family trip going?" Her warm voice on the other end of the line almost made me cry with relief. "Carol, I think I made a mistake coming here. What happened? Tell me everything." And then, for the first time, I said out loud what I had been feeling. I told her about the humiliations, about being treated like an employee, about the conversation I had overheard that morning. Carol listened in silence, and when I finished, she sighed deeply. "Grace, honey, do you know what you're worth? Do you have any idea how many lives you've saved? How many families you've comforted? I've seen you hold the hands of mothers losing their children. I've seen you stay after your shift to make sure patients are comfortable. You are an extraordinary woman. And if your own family can't see that, the problem isn't you." Her words hit me like a bolt of lightning in the darkness. For the first time in years, someone was reminding me who I was beyond being Michael's mother, beyond being the convenient grandmother, beyond being the woman who always said yes. When I returned to the hotel that evening, I found them in the bar, tanned and relaxed after their exclusive day out. Jessica was wearing a new dress, white with gold embroidery, and Michael sported a linen shirt I hadn't seen before. Sophia was asleep in her stroller, exhausted from the day's activities. "How was your day, Mom?" Michael asked, but he was already checking his phone, clearly uninterested in my answer. "Very quiet," I replied, but inside, I was boiling. Jessica approached me with that condescending smile she had perfected. "Grace, I need to ask you something. Michael and I have been thinking, don't you think it might be better if you head back to Cleveland tomorrow? We have some work meetings here, boring stuff, and we thought you might be more comfortable at home." There it was. The final expulsion, wrapped in the gift paper of false consideration. They wanted me out. After supposedly inviting me to celebrate together, after making me feel guilty for years for not being more present in their lives, they were now kicking me out like an inconvenient guest. "Besides," Jessica continued, lowering her voice as if doing me a favor, "we've noticed that you seem a bit confused at times. Don't you think it would be good for you to see a doctor? Just to rule anything out." The word confused struck me like a slap. They were subtly accusing me of having mental problems, of being a burden, of being someone to be disposed of with medical delicacy. That night, as I packed my suitcase with hands that no longer trembled but moved with a strange determination, I made a decision that would change everything forever. The next day, I wasn't going to go home like a discarded old woman. The next day, I was going to show them exactly who Grace Miller was. And none of them were prepared for what was coming. At 7 o'clock on Monday morning, instead of heading to the front desk to check out as they had suggested, I went down to the restaurant and ordered the most complete breakfast on the menu. Eggs Benedict, smoked salmon, fresh squeezed orange juice, and Colombian coffee. Everything I had never allowed myself because it was too expensive or too pretentious for someone like me. Tony, the waiter who had shown me compassion the day before, approached with a genuine smile. "Good morning, Mrs. Miller. How are you feeling today?" "Very well, Tony. Better than ever, in fact," I replied. And for the first time in days, my smile was real. I had made a decision during the early hours, after spending hours awake staring at my ceiling. I would no longer follow the script others had written for me. I would no longer be the convenient mother, the disposable grandmother, the woman who faded silently into the background when her presence became inconvenient. Michael appeared in the restaurant at 8:30, wearing chinos and a polo shirt, clearly expecting to find me already on my way to the airport. Seeing me sitting there calmly eating breakfast, his expression shifted from confusion to irritation in seconds. "Mom, what are you doing? I thought you'd already left," he said, approaching my table with the nervous haste of someone facing an unexpected problem. "Good morning, Michael. Sleep well?" I replied, deliberately slicing a piece of salmon without looking up. "Mom, we agreed yesterday that you'd go back to Cleveland this morning. Jessica already checked you out of your room." There it was. The confirmation that they had made decisions about my life without consulting me, as if I were a child incapable of managing my own affairs. "Oh, did she? How interesting. And who gave you permission to do that?" I asked, finally raising my gaze to meet his. "Because as far as I know, I'm a 67-year-old woman, perfectly capable of making my own decisions about when I leave a place." Michael sat down across from me, lowering his voice as if we were discussing something shameful. "Mom, don't make a scene. People are looking." "Let them look," I said, raising my voice slightly. "I have nothing to hide. Unlike some people who apparently discuss their mother's mental health with the spa staff." The color drained from his face. He knew that I knew. "Mom, we didn't. That wasn't what, Michael? Wasn't it true that your wife told a massage therapist I might have mental problems? Wasn't it true that you're discussing options to deal with me as if I were an old piece of furniture you need to get rid of?" Just then, Jessica appeared like a miniature storm, with Sophia in hand and an expression that mixed panic with contained fury. She wore a fitted black dress and heels that clicked on the marble floor like tiny warhammers. "Grace, what is going on? Why haven't you left?" Her voice maintained its artificial sweetness, but there was steel in her eyes. "Because I've decided to stay a few more days," I replied with a calm I didn't know I possessed. "It's a beautiful hotel, and I finally have time to enjoy it." Jessica shot Michael a look that screamed, "Do something," but my son seemed completely lost. For years, he had avoided any confrontation between his mother and his wife, always choosing the path of least resistance. But now, there was no escape. "Look, Grace," Jessica began, sitting down and adopting the condescending tone she used with service staff. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. We just wanted you to be comfortable. Sometimes at a certain age, changes in routine can be unsettling." "Unsettling?" I repeated, savoring the word. "You know what's really unsettling, Jessica? Working for 30 years in a hospital, saving lives, comforting families, and then being treated as if I'm too senile to recognize when I'm being disrespected." Sophia, who had been coloring quietly, looked up. "Why are you talking mean?" she asked with the brutally honest perception of children. Jessica immediately switched to protective mother mode. "It's nothing, sweetheart. Grown-ups just have complicated talks sometimes." Then she looked at me with eyes that could have cut glass. "Grace, perhaps we should continue this conversation in private. We don't want to confuse the child." "Oh, but I'm the confused one here," I said. my voice deliberately soft. According to you, I'm the one who needs to see a doctor, the one who has episodes, the one who asks strange questions. Michael finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. Mom, please. People are watching. And he was right. Other families had begun to pay discreet attention to our table, but for the first time in my life, I didn't care about being the center of uncomfortable attention. For decades, I had been invisible, minimizing my presence so as not to bother anyone. Not anymore. You know what, Michael? You're right. People are watching, and they're probably wondering how it's possible for a son to treat his mother this way. I rose from the table, my dignity intact. I'm going for a walk in the gardens. When you decide to treat me with the respect I deserve, I'll be available to talk. As I walked away, I heard Jessica hiss under her breath. This is a disaster. What will our contacts at the hotel think? Your mother is acting insane. But I also heard something else. The small voice of Sophia asking, Daddy, why is Mommy saying mean things about Grandma? I spent the next 2 hours walking through the hotel gardens, but this time not as a lonely, marginalized woman, but as someone who had finally found her voice. The Florida sun warmed my skin, and for the first time in years, I felt truly alive. At 11, Tony found me sitting on a bench near the main fountain. Mrs. Miller, excuse me for bothering you, but there's a small problem at the front desk. What kind of problem? Your family is there, speaking with the manager. They're saying you're having health issues and that you need medical supervision. They want us to escort you to your room to help you pack. My blood ran cold. They were trying to use my supposed mental condition to force me out, using the hotel staff as accomplices in their humiliation. Tony, I said, standing up with a resolve that surprised me, I need you to do me a favor. Could you ask the manager to come speak with me here in private? 20 minutes later, an elegant man in his 50s approached. He introduced himself as Mr. Davis, the hotel's general manager. His manner was professional but wary. Mrs. Miller, your family is concerned for your well-being. They say you've been acting unusually. And what do you think, Mr. Davis? In our conversations, have I seemed confused or mentally unstable to you? Mr. Davis paused, clearly uncomfortable. Well, no. You seem perfectly lucid. But your family insists. My family, I interrupted, is trying to manipulate you and your staff to get rid of me because my presence makes them uncomfortable. Does that sound like the behavior of people concerned for my well-being? It was then that I made the decision that would change everything. I took out my phone and called someone I hadn't contacted in years, someone I had known when Michael was a boy, who now held an important position in the world my son so admired. Arthur, it's Grace Miller. Yes, Michael's mother. I need to ask you a very special favor. Mr. Davis watched my phone conversation with growing curiosity, especially when I mentioned words like investment, shareholder, and legal documentation. When I hung up, I smiled at him with a serenity that amazed me. Mr. Davis, I believe that in a few hours you're going to understand why my family is so nervous, and why perhaps they should be the ones who need help packing their bags. 2 hours after my phone call, a black Mercedes pulled up to the main entrance of the hotel. From the back seat emerged Arthur Vance, a distinguished man of 65 in an impeccable suit. I had met him 30 years ago when he was a young, newly graduated lawyer, and I cared for his ailing mother during my night shifts at the hospital. Now, he was one of the most respected attorneys in South Florida and a senior partner at a prestigious law firm. Grace, he said with a warm smile, hugging me as if we were family. It's been too many years, though the circumstances could be better. I had explained the basic situation over the phone, my family trying to paint me as mentally incompetent to force me out of the hotel. But I hadn't told him everything. Not yet. Arthur, I need you to bring the documents you're holding in your safe, the ones I signed 5 years ago when I sold the family land. His eyes lit up with understanding. Ah, those documents. Are you sure you want to do this? More sure than I've ever been. Arthur headed straight for the reception desk, where Michael and Jessica were still talking to Mr. Davis, the manager. I saw them gesticulating dramatically, probably insisting on my supposed mental incapacity. But when they saw Arthur approach with his leather briefcase and professional bearing, Their expressions changed immediately. "Excuse me? Who are you?" Jessica asked with that sharp tone she used when she felt threatened. "Arthur Vance, attorney at law and legal representative for Mrs. Grace Miller," he replied with the authority of someone who had handled major cases for decades. "I understand there have been some misunderstandings regarding my client's mental capacity." Michael turned pale. "Legal representative? Mom, what's going on?" But I wasn't ready to answer that question yet. Instead, I had Arthur request a private meeting with the hotel manager. Mr. Davis, clearly unnerved by the presence of a lawyer, led us to his office on the second floor. "Mr. Davis," Arthur began, opening his briefcase with precise movements, "my client has been the victim of a defamatory campaign by her own family. They have attempted to make you and your staff believe she is suffering from mental decline, when in fact she is a perfectly lucid woman who is simply defending herself from years of emotional abuse." Mr. Davis nodded slowly. "That was my impression from the start. Mrs. Miller has been completely coherent in all our interactions." "Excellent. Then you'll have no problem extending her stay for as long as she deems necessary," Arthur continued. "In fact, I have documents here that I think will interest you." He pulled out a manila folder and extracted several official papers with legal seals. 5 years ago, Mrs. Miller sold a property in rural Georgia, a piece of land she had inherited from her family. What you may not know is that part of the payment for that sale was an equity stake in the development group that built this very hotel. The words dropped like bombs in the silent office. Mr. Davis's eyes widened as he took the documents and began to read them with growing astonishment. "According to these documents," Arthur continued, "Mrs. Miller owns 12% of the shares of the Serenity Grand Hotel Group. That makes her the second largest individual shareholder in this establishment." I watched the transformation on Mr. Davis's face as it went from confusion to shock, and then to something akin to professional panic. For 3 days, he and his staff had been treating one of the hotel's owners with contempt. "Mrs. Miller," Mr. Davis said, immediately rising from his chair. "I had no idea. If I had known—" "Don't worry," I said with a calm that surprised me. "I wasn't expecting special treatment. I was only expecting the basic respect any guest deserves. Something my own family, apparently, was unable to provide." Arthur smiled with the professional satisfaction of someone who had just played the winning card. "Mr. Davis, I believe we need to discuss some immediate changes. First, Mrs. Miller needs to be moved to the presidential suite. Second, any future attempts by her family to interfere with her stay must be reported directly to my office." Of course," Mr. Davis replied, visibly flustered. "We'll arrange the move immediately. And Mrs. Miller, please allow me to offer my sincerest apologies for any inconvenience." An hour later, as a team of staff moved my meager belongings to the most luxurious suite in the hotel, I watched from my new balcony as Michael and Jessica scurried through the lobby like headless chickens, clearly trying to understand what had just happened. The presidential suite was spectacular. 2 bedrooms, a private living room, a terrace with a panoramic view of the Atlantic, and a marble bathroom bigger than my kitchen back in Cleveland. But what I enjoyed most wasn't the luxury, but something much simpler: the silence. For the first time in years, I was in a beautiful space where no one was criticizing me, no one was marginalizing me, no one was treating me like a nuisance. I ordered tea from room service and sat on the terrace to watch the ocean, feeling a heavy weight lift from my chest. Tony, my waiter friend, appeared personally with the tea service. His eyes shone with amusement and something like pride. "Mrs. Miller, the whole staff is talking about what happened. It's like something out of a movie. What are they saying? That you were the secret owner all along, and that your family was treating you like dirt without knowing who they were dealing with." He chuckled softly. "Mr. Davis is running around like crazy, calling all the executives to explain the situation." That afternoon, after a delicious lunch on my private terrace, lobster, a gourmet salad, and a glass of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion that never came, I made a decision I had been putting off for decades. I called the bank where I had my savings account, the account I had kept secret for years, feeding it with small amounts from my hospital paychecks. and authorized a transfer I had been forbidding myself from making for far too long. "I'd like to book a trip," I told the travel agent I contacted next. "Something I've always dreamed of doing but never dared." "What did you have in mind?" "The Greek islands, Santorini, Mykonos. 2 full weeks, in the best available room." For years I had looked at pictures of those white and blue islands, dreamed of walking those seaside paths, imagined what it would feel like to have the Greek sun on my skin. But there was always a reason not to. Michael needed money for something. We had to save for emergencies. It was too expensive for someone like me. Not anymore. As I was finalizing the booking, I heard a soft knock on my suite door. It was Sophia, my granddaughter, all by herself. She had managed to slip away from her parents and find me. "Grandma, your room is huge," she shouted, running through the living room with the pure joy of a child. "How did you get here, sweetie?" "I told Daddy I was going to the potty, but I came to find you. Mommy and Daddy are acting really weird. They're talking in quiet voices and Daddy looks sad." I knelt to her level and looked her in the eyes. "Sophia, do you love me?" "Yes. You're the best grandma in the world. You smell like cookies and you always give the best hugs." Her simple words went straight to my heart. Here was pure love, without conditions, without a family political agenda. The love I had been looking for in all the wrong places. "You know what, Princess? Grandma is going on a very special trip soon. And when I come back, we're going to spend a lot of time together. But it's going to be different." "Different how?" "Different because Grandma is going to be very happy. And when someone is truly happy, they can give so much more love." 10 minutes later, Michael burst into the suite, clearly frantic. "Sophia, we've been looking everywhere for you." Then he looked at me with an expression that mixed confusion, fear, and something I hadn't seen in years. Respect. "Mom, we need to talk." "Yes," I replied, lifting Sophia into my arms. "I believe we do." But this time, the conversation was going to be on my terms. Michael stood in the entrance of my suite, holding Sophia as his eyes scanned the luxurious space I now occupied. The marble terrace, the designer furniture, the fresh flowers strategically placed by room service. It all seemed to remind him that something fundamental had shifted between us. "Mom," he began, his voice a nervous, forced, respectful tone I hadn't heard since he was a teenager. "Can we talk? Jessica is waiting downstairs." "Of course," I replied, settling into the blue velvet sofa as if I were born for elegant spaces. "Tell her to come up. It's time we had a proper family conversation." 20 minutes later, Jessica entered the suite with the stiffness of someone walking to her own execution. She had changed into a more conservative dress, as if instinctively understanding that the rules of the game had changed forever. Her heels, which had clicked with such authority just days before, now seemed to tap pathetically against the marble floor. "Grace," she said, attempting her usual condescending tone, but her voice trembled slightly. "I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" I repeated, pouring tea into the fine china cups that had arrived with room service. "You call it a misunderstanding that for 3 days you've treated me like a senile old woman to be tolerated out of pity?" Michael perched on the edge of the sofa, clearly uncomfortable. Sophia had run out to the terrace to watch the boats in the marina, oblivious to the toxic tension filling the room. "Mom, we never said you were senile," Michael tried, his voice lacking conviction. "Didn't you?" I took out my phone and played a recording. It was the argument I had overheard through the thin walls of our adjoining rooms. Jessica's voice came through, sharp and cruel. The massage therapist asked me if the older woman had some kind of mental problem, because she talks to herself and asks strange questions. The silence that followed was thick enough to cut with a knife. Jessica went pale, realizing she had been recorded. That audio is taken out of context," she stammered. "I was just worried about your well-being." "My well-being?" I rose from the sofa with an elegance that surprised me. "You call it well-being to check me out of my room without my consent, to exclude me from family activities, to suggest I need medical supervision?" I walked to the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the ocean, my back straight, feeling for the first time in years that I was taking up the space I deserved. For 30 years, I worked in a hospital, saving lives, comforting families in their worst moments. For 25 years, I raised a son alone after being widowed. For 5 years, I have been the perfect grandmother, available to babysit, to help, to give without ever asking for anything in return. I turned to face them, and I saw something in Michael's eyes I hadn't seen in years. Genuine shame. But apparently, I continued, none of that qualifies me for basic respect from my own family. Jessica tried to regain control. Grace, I understand you're hurt, but I think you're overreacting. We love you. That's why we were worried. Enough. The word erupted from my throat with a force that startled even me. Sophia peeked in from the terrace, frightened by the shout. Don't you ever lie to my face again, Jessica. You don't love me. You tolerate me. There is a world of difference. I pulled a folder from my bag that Arthur had left with me that morning. It contained not only the documents for my stake in the hotel, but also other papers I had been saving for years. Do you know what this is? I asked, holding up an official document. It's the deed to the house you live in. Yes, that house you boast about to all your friends. The house that allows you to maintain your social status. Michael went completely white. Mom, what are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that when you needed the down payment for that house 4 years ago, I took out a second mortgage on my apartment. I put my own home up as collateral so you could have your dream house in that gated community in Austin. The silence was deafening. Jessica stared at Michael with an expression of absolute shock. Michael never told you that, did he, Jessica? I went on. He never told you that the reason you can live in that fancy house is because his senile and problematic mother risked her own roof for your comfort. I held up another document. And this is the paperwork for the loan I gave you last year when your company was in trouble, Michael. $25,000 from my life savings. Did you happen to mention that to your wife? Michael couldn't even meet my eyes. Mom, I was going to pay you back. When? I asked. After you convinced me I needed psychiatric help? After you pushed me completely out of your lives? Or maybe after I was too old to remember you owed it to me? Jessica finally exploded, revealing her true colors. Oh, enough of this melodrama. You're an old woman living in the past. Michael has a right to build his own life without his mother emotionally blackmailing him. The room fell silent. Even Sophia stopped playing and watched us with wide, frightened eyes. Emotional blackmail, I repeated slowly. An interesting choice of words from someone who just found out her entire lifestyle is funded by the sacrifices of the woman she's been treating like dirt. I walked over to the suite's desk and pulled out more documents Arthur had prepared that afternoon. These are the papers to remove my name as guarantor from your mortgage, I announced with a calm that contrasted violently with the panic I saw growing on their faces. And this is a formal notice demanding the repayment of the $25,000 within 30 days. You can't do that, Jessica shrieked, jumping up from the sofa. You'll ruin us. Oh, so now I'm capable of making important decisions? I replied with irony. A few hours ago, I was too senile to manage my own hotel stay, but now I'm suddenly competent enough to ruin your lives. Michael finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. Mom, please. We can fix this. I didn't know Jessica said those things about you. You didn't know? I stepped closer to him, looking him directly in the eyes. You didn't know when you checked me out of my room without asking? You didn't know when you excluded me from your plans? You didn't know when your wife spoke to me like I was the hired help? Tears began to stream down Michael's cheeks, and for a moment, I saw the little boy he had been, the son I had raised with so much love and sacrifice. I just wanted to keep the peace, he mumbled. I didn't want to cause trouble between you two. And to keep your domestic peace, you decided to sacrifice your mother? I asked. You decided it was easier to let me be humiliated than to stand up for the woman who gave you life? Sophia came over and took my hand. Grandma, why is everyone crying? I knelt down to her level. Because sometimes grown-ups make very big mistakes, Princess. And when they realize their mistakes, it makes them sad. I stood up and looked at Michael and Jessica with a serenity it had taken me 67 years to develop. You have 24 hours to decide if you want a real relationship with me, one based on mutual respect, or if you prefer to continue this charade where I'm the convenient mother who appears when you need something and disappears when I'm an inconvenience. I walked to the suite door and opened it. But know this. I will never again allow you to treat me the way you have these past few days. I will never again stay silent when I'm disrespected. And I will most certainly never again finance the lifestyle of people who are ashamed of me. If by this time tomorrow you haven't come to me with a sincere apology and a plan for how we're going to rebuild this relationship on new terms, I will consider it your choice to lose me forever. Now, get out of my suite. I have a dinner reservation at the hotel's finest restaurant, and for the first time in years, I'm going to enjoy a meal without worrying if my presence is making someone uncomfortable. That night, I dined alone at the hotel's most exclusive restaurant. But for the first time in years, the solitude didn't feel like a punishment, but a choice. I sat at a table by the window with a direct view of the Atlantic, where the lights from yachts reflected on the water like fallen stars. I ordered the lobster thermidor, something I had seen on menus for decades but never allowed myself because it was too expensive for someone like me. The maitre d', who had clearly been briefed on my new status as a shareholder, attended to me with a deference that felt strange but not unpleasant. "Mrs. Miller, would you like a wine recommendation to accompany your meal?" "Yes," I replied without hesitation. "Your very best." My whole life, I had been the woman who ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, who declined extras, who calculated every expense. But that night, as I savored a Napa Cabernet that cost more than my weekly pay, I understood something fundamental. I wasn't spending money I didn't have. I was enjoying the resources I had earned through decades of work and sacrifice. As I ate, I observed the other tables. There were couples my age celebrating anniversaries, multi-generational families where grandparents held places of honor, men and women dining alone not out of abandonment but by choice. For the first time, I saw myself as part of that world, not an intruder who had slipped in by mistake. At 10 o'clock, Tony approached my table during a break in his shift. "Mrs. Miller, excuse me for bothering you, but I wanted to congratulate you. The entire staff is talking about how brave you were today." "Brave?" I asked, genuinely surprised. "Yes. I've worked in luxury hotels for 30 years, and I've seen a lot of wealthy families treat their elders poorly, but I've never seen a grandmother stand up for herself the way you did. It was inspiring." His words touched me deeply. For decades, I had been invisible to service staff, just another older woman who went unnoticed. But now someone saw me, acknowledged me, admired me. "Tony, can I ask you something? How do you treat your mother?" His face lit up instantly. "My mother is my hero. She worked as a seamstress to put my brothers and me through school. She lives with my wife and me now, and every Sunday we cook together. She picks the menu, she runs the kitchen. She's the queen of the house." I felt a pang of pain and envy. That's how it should be. That's how it could have been. After dinner, I went up to my suite, and, for the first time in years, I allowed myself something I had always considered a frivolity: a long bath with scented salts in the marble tub. As the hot water relaxed muscles that had been tense for decades, I reflected on everything that had changed in a single day. It wasn't just that I had revealed my stake in the hotel or confronted my family. It was something deeper. For the first time in my adult life, I had put my own needs first, without feeling guilty about it. The next morning, as I ate breakfast on my private terrace overlooking the Atlantic sunrise, Arthur arrived with more documents. "Grace, I've been reviewing all your assets," he said, sitting across from me with a smile I hadn't seen in years. "Do you know what you're actually worth?" I told him I wasn't sure. My entire life, I had thought in terms of survival, not net worth. Between your hotel shares, your stake in other investments you unknowingly made when you sold that family land, and the savings you've accumulated, you have a net worth of close to $500,000. The figure hit me like a lightning bolt. $500,000. I had been living like a poor woman while possessing the resources of someone well off. "Grace," Arthur continued, "you could live comfortably without ever working again. You could travel, buy a beautiful home, enjoy your golden years as you deserve." That afternoon, I decided to walk through the hotel boutiques, not to buy anything specific, but simply to experience what it felt like to enter elegant shops without immediately calculating if I could afford anything. In the first boutique, a young sales associate completely ignored me, clearly assuming I wasn't a potential customer. But when I asked about the most expensive dress in the window and pulled out my credit card without hesitation, her attitude changed dramatically. I tried on dresses that cost more than my monthly rent. I bought myself Italian shoes that were a work of art. I acquired a leather handbag that was as soft as butter. But the most important thing I bought was the feeling that I deserved beautiful things. As I walked back to my suite with my purchases, I passed other hotel guests. Women my age who wore elegant clothes, who walked with confidence, who took up space without apologizing. I realized that for the first time in decades, I was one of them. That night, dressed in my new outfit, I went down to the hotel's piano bar. I ordered a glass of champagne and sat down to listen to the live music. The pianist was an older gentleman who played classic American standards with a mastery that spoke of decades of experience. During a break, he approached my table. "Good evening, ma'am. Is there a song you'd like to hear?" "Do you know Unforgettable?" I asked. "Of course. Any special reason?" "It was my late husband's favorite song. I haven't listened to it in years because it made me sad. But I think it's time to remember happy moments without the pain." As he played that melody I had avoided for decades, I felt tears stream down my cheeks. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of release. I was releasing years of pent-up grief, years of making myself small, years of living for others. An older couple at a nearby table approached during the song. "Do you mind if we join you?" "It's one of our favorites, too." For the next hour, we talked about travel, about books, about the small joys of life after 60. They were Helen and Joseph, from Chicago, married for 40 years and still clearly in love. But what impressed me most was how they treated each other. With respect, with affection, with a courtesy I had forgotten could exist in family relationships. "Have you ever been to Santorini?" Helen asked when I mentioned my upcoming trip. "It's magical. The sunsets from Oya are the most beautiful thing we've ever seen." "Do you travel a lot?" I asked. "We do now," Joseph replied. "For years we thought we didn't have the money for it, that it was too expensive, a frivolity. But when we turned 60, we realized we'd been saving for a future that might never come. Now, we spend on experiences, on joy, on living." Their words resonated in my heart like bells of truth. At 11 o'clock, when I returned to my suite, I found a note slipped under my door. It was from Michael, handwritten on the hotel's official stationery. "Mom, Jessica and I have been talking all night. You're right about everything. I've been a coward and a bad son. I don't know if you can ever forgive me, but I want to try to be the man you deserved me to be. Could we have breakfast tomorrow? Just you and me, like when I was a kid, and you'd take me to the diner on Sundays. I love you, even though I haven't shown it well. Michael." I read the note 3 times, feeling something shift in my chest. It wasn't immediate forgiveness, but it was a possibility. That night, before falling asleep, I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back was different from the one who had arrived at the hotel 4 days earlier. She had the same age, the same wrinkles, the same gray hair, but there was something in her eyes that was entirely new. Dignity. For the first time in years, I liked what I saw in the mirror. For the first time in decades, I was excited for what came next. For the first time in my life, I was completely free. 6 months later, as I watched the sunset from the terrace of my new home in Carmel by the Sea, a cottage overlooking the Pacific that I had bought with my own resources, I reflected on how a single decision can change the entire course of a life. The sound of waves crashing against the rocks accompanied me as I prepared dinner for a very special guest, my granddaughter, Sophia. Breakfast with Michael that morning at the hotel had been the start of a conversation that lasted for months. There was no instant forgiveness or magical reconciliation. There was hard work, family therapy, and the slow construction of a brand new relationship based on mutual respect instead of obligation and guilt. Michael had kept his word. He paid back the $25,000, selling his luxury car and taking out a personal loan. He and Jessica separated. She could never accept that the family dynamics had changed forever. And most importantly, he began to treat me like the mother he should have, not a burden to be managed. "Grandma, Can we make cookies like last time? Asked Sophia, now 4, as she ran through my garden chasing butterflies. She came to visit me every weekend, and those moments had become the most precious parts of my new life. Of course, Princess. But first tell me, how was your week at school? Over these months, I had established new rules. I was no longer the emergency grandma who showed up when they needed a free babysitter. I was the grandmother Sophia visited because she wanted to be with me, because we had fun together, because we had built a genuine relationship free from the tensions that had poisoned my relationship with her father. My trip to Greece had been everything I had dreamed of and more. 2 weeks of walking the cobblestone streets of Santorini, watching sunsets that seemed painted by gods, eating at seaside tavernas where the waiters treated me like a queen, simply because I was a woman who had chosen to enjoy life. I had met other travelers my age, women who, like me, had discovered late in life the power of living for themselves. In Mykonos, I had met Eleanor, a retired psychologist from Boston who became one of my best friends. You know what the saddest part is? She had told me one night over dinner facing the Aegean Sea, that there are thousands of women like us who will never discover they deserve respect, they deserve joy, they deserve to take up space in the world without apologizing. Those words had inspired me to do something I had never imagined possible. With Arthur's help, I had established a small foundation for older women in situations of familial emotional abuse. It wasn't a grand thing, but each month we helped 3 or 4 women find resources, legal support, and most importantly, the understanding that they were not alone. Carol, my old colleague from the hospital, had been my first volunteer. Grace, for 30 years I watched you take care of everyone but yourself, she'd said when I proposed the project. It's time you used that same energy to help women who are where you used to be. My home in Carmel had become a refuge not only for me, but for the weekly meetings of our support group. Women in their 60s, 70s, even 80s, who had spent decades being invisible in their own families, gathered in my living room to share stories, strategies, and most importantly, to remind each other that they deserve dignity. Remember when you thought asking for respect was being selfish? Margaret, a 75-year-old woman whose daughter had treated her like a personal maid for decades, had asked me during our last meeting. I remember it perfectly, I had replied. But now I understand that true selfishness is expecting someone to sacrifice their dignity to maintain your comfort. This afternoon, as Sophia and I kneaded cookie dough in my bright, airy kitchen overlooking the sea, my granddaughter asked me a question that pierced my heart in the most beautiful way. Grandma, why does Daddy say you used to be different? I knelt to her level, my flour-dusted hands cupping her small face. Different how, honey? He says you used to be sad all the time, but now you're like sunshine. I smiled, feeling tears of gratitude well in my eyes. You know, Sophia, sometimes grown-ups forget that we deserve to be happy. But when we remember, it's like we turn on a light that's been off for a very long time. And your light won't go off again? No, Princess. I've learned that I'm the one who controls the switch. That night, after Michael came to pick up Sophia, I sat on my terrace with a glass of wine and the latest book I'd started, Women Who Run with the Wolves. At 67, I had discovered the pleasure of reading for pure enjoyment, not just the medical journals I'd read for work for decades. My phone buzzed. It was a text message from a woman named Patricia who had found our foundation through social media. Grace, I'm 72 and my family treats me just like you described in your story. Could I talk to someone tomorrow? I can't go on like this. I replied immediately. Patricia, tomorrow at 10 in the morning at my home. I'll send the address. You are not alone anymore. As I typed the response, I remembered something Eleanor had told me in Greece. Pain that is not transformed is transmitted. But when you manage to transform your pain into wisdom, you can transform the pain of others too. Putting my phone away, I saw my reflection in the glass door. The woman looking back at me was the same one who had arrived, humiliated, at that Miami hotel 6 months ago, yet everything about her had changed. Her shoulders were straight, her eyes shone with purpose, and her smile was no longer a mask for survival, but a genuine expression of joy. Before going inside, I looked out at the ocean one last time. On the horizon, the lights of a cruise ship moved slowly, carrying people toward new adventures, new discoveries, new versions of themselves. Next month, I would fly to Italy with Eleanor. We had planned a trip through Tuscany, visiting vineyards and museums, staying in small family-run hotels where we would be treated like the queens we had learned we were. I was no longer the woman who ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, but someone who understood that life is too short to deny yourself the small luxuries that are within reach. But more than the travel, more than the beautiful house, more than the financial independence, what I valued most was something much simpler and more fundamental: respect. The respect of my son, who now called to ask how I was instead of only when he needed something. The respect of my granddaughter, who saw me as her favorite grandma instead of an emergency babysitter. And above all, my own respect, which I had reclaimed after decades of giving it away for scraps of affection. That night, before sleeping, I wrote in the journal I had started after my trip to Florida, "Dear Grace of the past, for 67 years, you believed your worth depended on how much you could give to others, even when it meant sacrificing your own dignity. Today, I want to tell you that you were wrong. Your worth was always there, waiting for you to have the courage to claim it. It's never too late to start living for yourself. It's never too late to demand respect. It's never too late to be happy." I closed the journal and turned off the light, but not before glancing one last time at the sea. Tomorrow would be another day in my new life, filled with possibilities I had never before allowed myself to imagine. And for the first time in decades, I fell asleep smiling. Sometimes the best stories don't end with the happily ever after you expected, but with the beginning of the life you always deserved to live. Have you ever experienced something like this, or do you know someone who has? Tell me your story in the comments. If this story touched your heart, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel so this message can reach someone who needs to hear it. Because we all deserve to live with dignity, no matter our age.